Thanks for staying with us. You're watching Holy Land Uncovered. I'm Tal Heinrich. Every week we take you on a tour to some of the most interesting sites in the region. Today we'll visit a magnificent site, Caesarea, the ancient port city of King Herod the Great. It also had a major role in the New Testament and in the history of sports as well. Here's the tour with cameraman Ron Schneck and tour guide Arya O'Sullivan. The perfect match between a beautiful beach and magnificent artifacts can be found here in Caesarea, or Caesarea, an ancient port city mostly associated with King Herod the Great. This large, unique compound offers a rare overview to a history of more than 2,000 years, as it was one of the major entrances to the Middle East. The history of Caesarea goes back to the 3rd century BCE. But the real significance of the city was recorded during the reign of King Herod. The king saw great potential in the port city and established some lavish structures in it, such as his palace and one of the first amphitheaters in the region. Arya, why did King Herod pick Caesarea as his spot?
You know, Caesarea is one of the most spectacular sites in Israel, archaeologically and religiously. And so King Herod, who was a builder, was appointed by the Romans, and he wanted to cozy up to the Romans after he became the king. And so he said, I'm going to build a city for the Romans, call it Caesarea, after the name of the Caesar. And so he did, and he came here. This was a nothing spot. They had like a little tower here called Strato's Tower, and in the course of 12 years, only 12 years, he built a spectacular city with a hippodrome and the palaces and the theater over here, and it's just an amazing city.
What is so special about the architecture that we see around here?
King Herod was a builder, and he brought the finest craftsmen to this Caesarea, and he was going to build this city in 12 short years. He built a hippodrome, he built the theater over here, the palace is behind me, and he said, you know what, mankind is going to decide where we're going to build. They didn't have a port here, so he had special cement brought from Rome that hardened underwater, and he built a huge port that went out to the sea. He didn't have water here. There was no spring, so he brought the water in aqueducts from the mountains all the way to Caesarea, and he had the finest craftsmen. They didn't have marble, so what they did was they made some wall out of sandstone, they covered it with plaster, and they painted it like marble, and it looked just like the ones in Rome. And over behind me was a palace, which he built out into the sea. Inside is a Olympic-sized pool, and he filled it up not with seawater, but with sweet water, so he could say, look how great I am.
One of the most famous attractions back then in Caesarea is this hippodrome. Describe us the scene that took place here.
The hippodrome was one of the most popular sites, like you say, and there was the chariot races that would take place here. The people would start down there, and they would go around 7 times. Now, where's the most exciting spot to be? It's here in the turn, the circus, because that's where they flipped over. It got too fast for them. And you know what? King Herod decided, I'm going to have not just a victor, but 1st place, 2nd place, and 3rd place. He's the one who came up with that idea. And King Herod, you know, he lived in Jerusalem, was a very stressful city. One of the reasons he built Caesarea, besides to cozy up to the Romans, was to have a place where he could come and get away from it all. Come down here, watch the races, go to the theater, go to a swimming pool. And you know what? Other leaders today have houses in Caesarea, just like the Prime Minister, who's got a house right up here, and he sometimes gets away from all this stress of Jerusalem and escapes on the Mediterranean coast.
Caesarea plays a major role also in later periods, especially in the New Testament. This stone tablet is a replica of one of the most important pieces of evidence for the Gospels. Arya, so this exact location is believed to have been the headquarters of Pontius Pilate?
That's right. In fact, this stone here could be evidence, more evidence that this is true, because this is the only evidence. It's got the name of Pontius Pilate written right here in Latin, of that person ever existing. It was found to secondary use over there in the theater, and when they opened it up, they said, hey, this was a real character. And he was the one who had the trial for Jesus. And you know what? If he was for real, maybe Jesus was for real.
Caesarea is mentioned in the New Testament as part of the route taken by St. Peter the Apostle, one of the 12 apostles of Jesus. The Apostle Peter came here, Arya, and his visit to Caesarea transpired as one of the key moments in the formation of Christianity, I guess we can say.
That's true. Caesarea was a pagan city, and Peter was in Jaffa, and he had a vision that night, and it said that from that vision he realized that other people besides Jews should become Christians. And Cornelius, a Roman centurion, summoned him to Caesarea. He came here, and he converted Cornelius to Christianity, and it marked the first time that Gentiles, pagans, non-Jews, could become Christians. And he was on this port later on in his life and was sent off to Rome, where he was the first pope and was later crucified.
It is also mentioned as the place of the trial of St. Paul before he fled to Rome, an event mentioned in the book of Acts.
And another apostle of Jesus connected to this place is St. Paul. What's his story?
Well, Paul was imprisoned here, and he was on trial, and the Roman governor Festus and King Agrippa said, let's have him on trial. Let's hear what he has to say. And he talked about how Jesus had come back from the dead, and King Agrippa said, you know, you've almost converted me. But the governor Festus says, you know, you have too much knowledge, it's making you crazy. You have appealed as a Roman citizen to go on trial before Caesar. To Caesar you will go. And he put him on a boat on this wharf, sent him off to Rome, where he was eventually beheaded.
Recently, the Rothschild Foundation announced a new project worth tens of millions of dollars to invest in the reconstruction and excavation of Caesarea. Emmanuel Rossa from the Israel Nature and Parks Authority explains.
Emmanuel, tell us about the work taking place here.
So, as you can see, it's a very big project of restoration and preservation of the inner port. So the grass symbolized the inner port of Herod's time, and the stones over here, this wall, was the pier, and those arches, they were the warehouses using for the pier. So the inner port used for luxury goods, and those warehouses used to store those luxury goods. On top of those arches, they built a temple for goddess Roma and the Caesar Augustus. And from the pier, there were steps going all the way up to the temple. And we're going to restore those arches, we're going to restore the steps, and it's going to take a few years more, but when it will be finished, it will be a very nice thing to see and to visit.
From the glorious times of King Herod to our days, Caesarea has always been a place of luxury, architecture, and a port city which was a window to the Mediterranean Sea. Now, when digging has renewed, who knows what else can be found here on the shores of one of the most beautiful sites of the Holy Land.
Well, it was beautiful indeed. I hope you enjoyed the sea breeze in Caesarea, just as I did. After a short break, we will continue to travel to the north of Israel and will take part in a special reenactment of the Battle of Hattin. It's a battle between crusaders and forces of Salah ad-Din, the first sultan of Egypt and Syria. Our reporter Shelby Weiner was there, and from what I've heard, it was an extremely detailed event, high-level production.